Jim Gottstein, all the way from Alaska, and he did go to school down there at the University of Oregon before he went to Harvard Law School.
I thought I'd start with my personal story. When I was 29 in 1982, I just got in a situation where I didn't sleep. I was trying to do too much. I didn't get sleep for days. And so basically I went psychotic. And I went over to my dad's house to try and get some sleep. And I was actually sleeping in his bed. And just as I fell asleep, I heard something coming down the hall, and I thought it was the devil. It was the second floor, and I looked out the window. I remember looking out the window, and there was a lawn down there, and there was a sidewalk down there. And I go, I'm in my underwear. It's about 1 in the morning, but it's June, so it's light out. In Anchorage, of course, June, it doesn't get dark. And so I thought, well, I know how to do a parachute landing fall, and if I can miss the sidewalk, I'll be okay, right? Okay, now isn't that logical? The devil's coming down the hall, right? So I jumped out the window, did a parachute landing fall, didn't hurt myself at all. This is a second floor window. Ran across the street, and I was wild in my underwear and spinning around, because I thought someone was behind me, and so I kept looking behind me, so I was spinning around. Anyway, they came with an ambulance and a straitjacket and captured me and took me to the Alaska Psychiatric Institute, universally known in Alaska as API, where they shot me up with something to put me down. So I remember this vividly. So I'm in bed, and I wake up, and there's this, a male nurse or whatever he was. He had a clipboard, and he was sitting there, and he was looking at me, and he said, "What day is it?" And I said, "How long have I been asleep?" And he wrote down, "Doesn't know what day it is." Or as they say, not oriented to time or whatever it is. Huh?
Time's 3.
Yeah.
Person, place, and time.
Yeah, person, place, and time. So I didn't know the time. And so that was kind of the first thing. And so, I was 29 at the time. I actually had graduated from Harvard Law School and had been practicing law for a few years. And so I was kind of used to being able to make my own decisions. And so it was a little adjustment in the hospital. I used to joke at that time and said, it's kind of ridiculous to tie a rope around your neck, every morning, right? Referring to a tie. So they wrote down, he wants to hang himself with his tie. And one of the things that I did was that I, just as a matter of kind of protest, I would go limp and make them catch me, right? Well, one time they didn't catch me, and I hit my head, and I go, oh, well, that's not very smart. And so I quit doing that. Those that believed I was an attorney said I would never do that again, and I would never have a productive life. And when I told them that I'd gone to Harvard Law School, that just confirmed that I was delusional. And one of my messages is being resistant to this idea that you're mentally ill and that you're never going to do anything is one of the most positive things that you can do. Anyway, so I was lucky in a lot of ways. And that's really a big thing for me, is that I feel like I was lucky to have escaped being made permanently mentally ill by the system. But one thing is that they wanted to give me lithium, and I was a pilot, and they didn't care that would mean that I couldn't fly. But they insisted, and so they had me do what's called a creatinine clearance test, because lithium is very toxic on the kidneys, and I didn't have a good creatinine clearance, and so they sent me to a nephrologist to do a kidney biopsy, and the nephrologist couldn't find my kidney. He was poking me in the back. So that was pretty lucky. I told them, well, I don't want Thorazine, because I'd heard about Thorazine, and they said, okay, well, we're not going to give you Thorazine, we're going to give you Mellaril. Okay, that's nothing like Thorazine. Well, it's exactly like Thorazine. I mean, it's the same category. Phenothiazines, I've learned how to say those kind of things. And so, so again, I was lucky. I had a couple of psychiatrists that I didn't like and all these sort of things. And then I had one by the name of Robert Alberts. And he said, look, you just got in a situation where you didn't sleep, and anybody will go psychotic if they don't sleep long enough. And so, you know, you can learn to deal with that. And so what I've learned is to manage my situation. And so for me, what happens is that if I'm working on a project, like as a lawyer, you know, and I have a deadline, and it's really close, and I'm not really on top of it, then I can't stop thinking about it, and I can't sleep. And so, therefore, you know, that's a problem. And what I do about that is I almost always file the pleadings, the papers, the briefs, or whatever you want to call them, the day before they're due. And that way, you know, I don't run into that problem as much. And so that's kind of unusual for a lawyer, because you can always make things better when you're a lawyer. You can, you know, go over it again and you can make it better. But then when the deadline comes, well, you got to get it in. But for me, I just say, no, I'm gonna get it good enough, and then I'm going to file it and get out of those problems. And the other thing is to really be aware of what causes you problems. And for me, it's not rocket science. If I'm not sleeping and I'm not very tolerant of that, I'm going to have problems. And so, well, and that's really true for a lot of people. I mean, you just hear constantly that sleep is the cause of psychosis. And I heard an expert one time say that psychosis is always accompanied by sleep deprivation. Well, I don't know about always, but I certainly know that it is a lot. And so for me, I've kind of learned to recognize the progression. So the first thing that'll happen is that I'll get kind of witty and sharp and stuff, and nobody but me really notices. You know, it's not that unusual. And then I'll have what's called thought blocking. Do people know what thought blocking is? It's where you start to say something and you just kind of stop in the middle, and then you do it. It's not quite not finding a word, but you just kind of stop in the middle. And then I'll get to a point where I think people are looking at me weird. That's, you know, not a good sign, basically. But what I do for that is a couple things. One, I really convince myself that they're probably not looking at me funny. But if they are, it's probably because I'm doing something weird, right? And so then what I try and do is just observe what I'm doing to make sure that I'm not doing something to make people want to, you know, grab me and put me in the hospital. And so, I don't know, if that's the way that I've learned to deal with it. And I don't know if people know about the WRAP program, the Wellness Recovery Action Plan program that Mary Elizabeth Copeland, I think, put together. It's kind of got it's this organized program where people look at their triggers and figure out what helps, what things are detrimental, and then have an emergency plan. And I highly recommend that. Okay, so that's my story.